My name's Frank Anderson. I was born in Des Moines, Iowa in the year 1937.
And tell me a little bit about your family. Who were your parents?
My parents got divorced when I was about 5, but my dad started in Western Union as a bike message delivery boy, probably when he was 14 or 15 years old. Worked for Western Union for almost 65 years. Retired finally and ended up living in Des Moines. My mom moved my brother and I to our grandparents' house in Omaha, Nebraska, and that's where I grew up. And she worked in a furniture store office for her entire working career.
So tell me, how did you end up in Benton County, Arkansas?
Benton County, Arkansas was quite an experience for me. I had never been to Arkansas. I was in the Air Force. I was on my 23rd, 24th year of being in the Air Force, and my brother and sister-in-law moved to Bella Vista. I had been recruited by the marketing schemes of Cooper Communities to come down here and buy a lot. They came down and bought a lot. And probably 10 or 12 years after they bought the lot, they came down and were going to build a house. Ended up buying a house that was already built. So the last 3 or 4 years I was in the service, we came down here to visit them 2 or 3 times. Decided, hey, that would be a nice environment to try. I like to play golf. There's 7 golf courses down there. I don't have to play the same one all the time. And there's lakes down there. It's a nice retirement area. Northwest Arkansas seems to be extremely friendly, actually, and a nice place to live. Schools are good, although we don't have no school children with us. Things are going well in Northwest Arkansas, so we try it. And 35 years later, I'm still trying it.
So talk about the year you got here and what it was like back then. What did it look like? What was the community like?
The community life back when I first got here was considerably different than it is now, in that most of the people were retirees. They didn't actually have a full-time job. Some of them had part-time jobs, but very few full-time workers lived out in Bella Vista when we moved here. Most of them were golfers, so you met and knew probably 50-60% of the people that lived here you actually knew, if not by name, at least by face and seeing them in various places. There were no restaurants in Bella Vista. There were no grocery stores in Bella Vista. Bentonville was the closest place. If you really wanted to go out to eat, you went almost all the way to Fayetteville. There were probably only 3 or 4 restaurants between here and Fayetteville that you'd stop and go to. Not even too many fast food places. So it was a totally different environment than what it is now, obviously. It was friendly, still is, but it was extremely friendly then. Like I say, you knew almost everybody. Over the years, more and more people have moved in, and we're now up to a population of pretty close, or a little over 30,000 people, from around 7,000, 8,000 at the most when we moved here. So there's a big difference. When you see the roads and drive on the streets, the main streets especially, like the Chelsea roads, anything with a road ending in their name, like Chelsea Road, any of the roads, there are no driveways on those roads. There are no houses on those roads. You have to drive on the streets off of those roads to get into the neighborhoods, and that's when you see the houses and the people. So there are a lot more houses in Bella Vista than one would think just by taking a quick drive around the city.
So let's talk about how you first got involved in politics. What was the occasion and how did you decide to run?
Well, my politicking days start back a little before we were a city. Actually, we had not even voted to incorporate yet. I became upset with the way the Property Owners Association was dealing with some of the golf course issues that were going on at the time, like amount of time that you could play, it took to play golf, how long they allowed you to play, what the costs were, the differences between what the 18-hole golfers got to do and the 9-hole golfers got to do. So first off, I joined the golf committee. I got on the golf committee to see why and how anybody could make any changes to the golfing situation in Bella Vista. Was on the golf committee about 6 years, chairman a couple. Became familiar with the operation of the POA board. Had the POA general manager actually asked me if I wouldn't run for the board. And I felt kind of out of place in that I didn't think I wanted to do that, but he was a good friend, and finally I said, well, in my own mind, I will run for the board because he thinks it's a good idea for me. I don't know enough people, so I won't have to worry about getting elected, but I'll run. So I ran for the board, and lo and behold, I got elected. So then I was on the POA board for 6 years, chairman of that board for a couple, actually served as general manager for about 6 or 8 months, in between general managers while we hired another one, became probably the person that was the most familiar with all of the operations of the POA during that period of time, actually supervised the employees of the POA during that time, including the police department, fire department, street department. So knew the most about the city, or not the city at that time, but the POA and how it operated. And the POA actually operated as a city government, although it really wasn't a government. It was a privately owned corporation that elected its own board of directors from its 39,000 members spread out all across the world. Obviously not all of them voted, just like any voting structure, but we had a fairly high percentage of, in the neighborhood of 20,000 people voting for POA board and the various things that the POA put up before its voters. So we had a pretty good turnout, although not physically, at least in response to any kind of a vote. So when I ran for the POA board, that's how we got elected, that's how we ran. Not knowing anybody, providing the information and marketing flyers and those kind of things in the mail, answering questions, attending an awful lot of meetings. That was my introduction to what I would call politics back in the POA days. When the city came along and it became time to vote on whether we would incorporate or not, I had also chaired a committee that had put together a plan as to how you would get from unincorporated to incorporated. What would you do first? What part of the city, what part of government would you bring in? Obviously you couldn't just start and all of a sudden operate a police, fire, streets, and futility.
So, explain how the election went. Who got to vote in that? Was it just people in those precincts that were being considered, or how did that work?
It was voted on by the people in the area to be annexed. And we went under a special law that had been passed just probably less than a year before the election, where any area in excess of 4,000 acres owned and developed by a single developer with, I don't remember the population number now, but some number of people living in that area could petition for annexation and only 28% of the people that lived in that area needed to sign the petition in order to get it on the ballot. So that was how it got onto the ballot. And when it got onto the ballot, like I say, most people still did not think it would pass. It was not a done deal. It was not a unanimous thing that everybody in the area wanted. And most of the people in the rest of the county didn't want it because it took monies, turnback funds from the state, away from the county and would give them to the city government if that happened. So they didn't want it. So there was campaigning for and against it by both people inside and outside of the area. Some of the area in Bella Vista at the time was not in the Property Owners Association, and is still not. Areas that the Cooper community folks could not get to sign off and buy the land from. So there were areas or pockets that were not part of the POA. Those were not to be part of the city either initially. They were not included in the incorporation vote. So it was not till 5 or 6 months after the city became incorporated that we then went back and annexed those pockets that were completely surrounded by the city at the time into the city. So there are still some pockets that are not part of the POA within the city limits of Bella Vista.
So talk about the time frame. How long after you got on the POA board did you become mayor, and then, what year was that until now?
Okay, I was elected to the POA board probably in 1994, was on it until 2001. Chairman for a couple of those years in there. We did not get the incorporation vote, actually vote, until November of 2006. So probably late 2004 into 2005 was when we put together the committee to decide or to come up with a method for incorporation, a plan to get there from no incorporation to full incorporation. And it was then in late 2006, early 2007 before it became clear that we were going to get it on the ballot and we were going to get to vote on it, and people came out of the woodwork in order to run for the various offices.
So let's talk about the Bella Vista law, or the change that basically allowed Bella Vista to become a city. Who ran the bill, and how did you lobby to get that in?
I was not part of that particular thing. A fellow by the name of J.D. Highfill was the self-appointed chairman, if you will, of this committee to incorporate. And he worked with our state representatives in order to get that bill passed. And it had been, to get on the ballot before that time, it would have taken 38% of the electorate on a petition in order to get on the ballot. So what that dropped it to was they dropped it to 28%, which was a sizable number of people at the time. That you didn't need on the petition. I don't know if they would have made it if they'd still needed the 38% number petition-wise, because it was almost a year-long process to get that petition with enough signatures so that it was considered a valid petition and they put it on the ballot.
So once the voters approved it, maybe to the surprise of some, what were your early challenges? For example, police, and you're getting your department set up. You talked about that had to be phased in. How did that work?
Well, like I say, we got elected on the first Tuesday in November of 2006. We wouldn't actually become a city, nor would we actually hold office until the 1st of January. So we had about a month and a half to get together, the three of us, lawyer, city clerk, and mayor, to come up with what is it we need to do first, what do we have to have, what's critical, what's not critical, what can hold off on, what has to be done now. And we started with that plan that I and the rest of the committee, another committee, had put together to say, is this still feasible? Is this really the way we want to do it? We actually began visiting cities in and around Bentonville, Bella Vista, to see how they operated, to see what kind of accounting systems they used, because at the time we had no money, no office, no furniture, no equipment, no people, no way to get money or do anything until the Turnback Fund started, which would be about 60 days after we actually became a city. So we're talking about the end of February before we would have money. It's kind of hard to get people to do things for you if you don't have money. So starting January 1, we actually borrowed money from the POA. My recollection is we borrowed about $20,000 to begin buying equipment, furniture, software systems, get some space that we could use as an office, and some of those kinds of things. Cooper Communities was very helpful to us. They gave us, loaned us, I will say, loaned us some space, free of cost for a few months until we got our feet on the ground. They actually gave us some computer equipment that we could use at the time. We actually purchased, using some of that $20,000, an accounting system that we were able to get up and get running by January 1st. We had a great secretary or recorder treasurer elected who had had an awful lot of experience in Wisconsin in smaller towns, smaller cities as a recorder treasurer. So she knew all the ins and outs about the things that we really needed to get up and running, like the accounting system. Spent the time putting it together, got it up and running. Without her, it would have been, or without someone who had that kind of experience, it would have been extremely tough.
Tell me her name and a little bit more about her.
Jane Wilms was her name, and like I say, she was, I think, about a 17 or 18-year resident of Wisconsin that had spent time as a recorder treasurer in that state. And even though that state and Arkansas laws are not the same, a lot of the same kind of things have to be done. Accounting systems, ordinances, way to pass ordinances, what ordinances should do and what they shouldn't do. All of that kind of stuff that none of the rest of us had any experience with at all. So it was a godsend that she first wanted the job and then second got elected.
Let's talk about law enforcement. What was it like before Bella Vista was a city, and how did it change, and then how is it now?
Okay, law enforcement in Benton County, it required a special law that applied to just Bella Vista and Hot Springs in order to get law enforcement in those two Cooper community areas. Before we became a city, the credentialing or the certification of security or police officers was done by the county sheriff. And the day-to-day operation from a true policing standpoint, police procedures and those kind of things, was governed by the sheriff. He told the deputy in case of Bella Vista how to operate, what uniforms to wear, all of those kind of things were covered by the sheriff. The other part of the day-to-day operation, the payroll, that kind of stuff, was taken care of by the Property Owners Association, and the deputy in Bella Vista worked for the general manager of the Property Owners Association in that role. A split role that sometimes worked well and sometimes there was a little bit of controversy about what they could or couldn't do. There were some issues with probably more than $1 million a year to put into reserve for the first 6 or 7 years that we were in existence. And since then we've done about the same. We still have that same reserve build up now, have held on to it for quite a few years. The turnback funds take care of just about all our needs. The numbers go up so far, or have gone up so far every year for us, just because of sales tax within the county that we get a share of. That's going to change over time as the ratios of people in the various cities interact with one another. For instance, Centerton, Pea Ridge, some of those cities are becoming bigger and bigger. They're taking a little bigger chunk all the time. It's got to come from somewhere. Some of that will come out of Bella Vista probably. Although Bella Vista has been growing fairly strongly too, population-wise, over the same number of years, so we haven't lost much yet. The county's probably lost more than anybody, and they're still making it. I don't know how much longer, but they're still making it now. The city of Bella Vista is not out of the woods yet, not going to necessarily be a super prosperous city, because we have very little economic or space for economic growth. The one thing Cooper Communities did not do very well was plan for commercial space. There was little commercial space left, a few strip mall areas, but they're not big enough to entice anybody to come in and build on them anything of any size that would provide much of a way of income. So that's still a future roadblock, I think, to Bella Vista ever becoming fully formed, completely filled up type city. Right now Bella Vista is an amazing city in that there are probably few cities, if any other, in the United States that would have 39,000 lots and only about 14,000 structures on those 39,000 lots. And yet all the other 24,000 vacant lots have water, electricity, and are ready to be built on today, with the exception of cleaning off the trees and the shrubbery, putting in the building and all that kind of stuff. So there's not many places in the country that have that, if any.
So you're talking about this huge capacity to expand, and
Oh, yeah.
then, but what about the other properties that the POA owns? Is there more potential for more? Explain,
No,
Well, you said they own-
the potential for expansion is somewhat limited in that there's really no more land. Cooper Communities owns some land west of Bella Vista still, but I don't think they have any intent, at least as of now for sure, to develop that in any way. Not saying that sometime downstream somewhere it couldn't happen, but not now, not for any time now. So right now they have no more area that they want to develop and add to the Property Owners Association, or any area that they want to develop. It would not be developed as part of Bella Vista anyway, because the cities to the west, Gravett in particular, has moved their boundaries up right next to Bella Vista now. So that's now Gravett. As soon as you leave Bella Vista going west, you're in Gravett. and there's a little area that used to be not a town, not even an incorporated area, referred to as Hiawassee, and it's now part of Gravett. That has become part of the city of Gravett, and Hiawassee borders on parts of Bella Vista. So Bella Vista to the west is landlocked by a city. To the north, it's landlocked by the state of Missouri. To the south, Pea Ridge, Bentonville, Rogers pretty much block it off. The only direction for expansion in Bella Vista right now would be to the east, would be east of Highway 94. And to my knowledge, there's not a lot over there right now except pasture land, farmland, and tree land.
Let's talk about how Bella Vista kind of led the way for Arkansas to, before some other states did, switched from blue to red, Democrat to Republican, because there were so many retirees and older voters here back in the day that it would swing the elections in Benton County before, or do you?
Being a retirement community, when I moved here was 96% retirees, mostly transplants from the north, probably the great majority of them Republican based to some degree at the time. Very good voters in that they had nothing else to do but play golf at the time. So they would show up at the polls, influence, no doubt, many votes in Benton County, because they would always be the highest rated polling places from the attendance standpoint. Their vote would swing quite a few of the elections.
Can you think of any in particular that it may have swung?
I think it probably impacted most of them back in those days. There was just too many voters in Bella Vista. And just like today, you'd get 10 or 12% of the polling, or the voters in a lot of the polling places in Rogers and Bentonville and all, and you'd get 60 or 70% of the voters in the polling places in Bella Vista. That's going to make a difference. And did.
So, besides the hunting, what are some of the other issues that may have been big issues back in the day when you were mayor?
Oh, there were some strange ones at times, but the second biggest one probably had to do with whether Walmart Neighborhood Market would come into Bella Vista. Walmart was attempting to buy some land, had indicated they had plans to put in a neighborhood market. It was relatively close to a grocery store that already existed in Bella Vista that had become popular by the name of Allen's. And the Allen's the folks that wanted Allen's to be the grocery store and thought it was the best grocery store in the world, attended the meeting in force concerning planning and discussion of the possible or potential neighborhood market. And after pretty much consternation and chaos at a couple of city council meetings, Walmart decided that maybe this wasn't the best place and pulled out of Bella Vista, which again hurt the commercial market, hurt the income for the city, protected Allen's, and Allen's is a good grocery store. I personally don't think it would have had much impact on Allen's because they're kind of a niche grocery store, carry a lot of different brands Walmart doesn't even touch, so I think they would have been fine. But the people at Allen's didn't think that, and the people in support of Allen's didn't think that. So they spoke, and Walmart, after seeing all of the chaos, attending a couple meetings where there were 200 or 300 people there saying no, I decided, well, maybe it's not the time to go into Bella Vista. So they did not come.
So the city didn't reject them as much as they just gave up the fight?
City government didn't want to reject them. We wanted them. I would have been recruiting them. I was talking to them all the time, hoping they would come, because any of the bigger Walmart stores, neighborhood market, Walmart supercenter, any of those things are a boon to your economy for a city with no more commercial development than Bella Vista has. I mean, we just don't have much. We got about 4 restaurants, relatively small ones, a couple fast food places. We don't have much in the way of commercial.
How has your city been impacted by the development of I-49? I know that's been in the bypass. I know that's been kind of slow coming, but how has...
I think the only impact that we're seeing now, and the one we've had, the one that's been talked about forever, was everyone felt that it would open up the land to the west. Highlands, which is our 1/3 of our city, is actually west of Highway 279. The bypass goes right by an edge and a corner of it. That was supposed to open up that area over there, because right now, to get from Highlands to Bentonville, you come all the way down through town, which is almost 17, 18 miles before you get to I-49, and then you still got to go down 49 to Bentonville. Going this way, you would be on I-49 right away, and it's probably, I don't know, it's probably a tenth of the length of time to get to Bentonville from using that road as it is to come down through town. We've already begun to see that. The bypass opened up just this past spring, fully, and there's already more housing requests and plans for new structures in Highlands than there has been for quite a few years through this period of time. So there are more people moving in. Does that help or hurt Bella Vista? You can look at it 2 ways. We get a little bit in property tax, but we got to spend a lot more taking care of roads and those kind of things. So I'm not sure there's much of a plus for the city. Hopefully we can just break even.
Are there any issues or stories that you can think of maybe that I didn't ask about that you want to talk about?
I don't think so. I think it's the same as any city. It's got the same kind of problems. The one thing unique about Bella Vista is that you don't see many cities. At the time we incorporated, we were probably close to 25,000 people. We became incorporated, and that day we became the 12th or 13th largest city in Arkansas. That doesn't happen too many times, too many places. Most cities, if you watch them incorporate, they're the 500, the 700, the 900 people variety. Not too many 25,000 groups of people are going to incorporate. Took us a long time. Was a difficult battle, and I was not part of all the battle. Like I say, I didn't really participate in trying to get it done. I was just ready to help it get done after they decided they wanted to do it.
So, what do you see happening in the future? I mean, you talked earlier about the pent-up supply of all these lots, and maybe the deceptive nature of how really filled out it is, because you can't always see it.
Yeah, you can't see it when you drive around. Like I say, you have to get out into the neighborhoods. You can't drive on the major streets and see what most of Bella Vista looks like. There are no houses off the really major streets. There are no driveways off the really major streets. You got to go down into the neighborhoods. And until you get down into them, you don't know how many houses are there. There may be 1 for 2 miles, or there may be 60 in that same stretch, depending on what neighborhood you're in. So there are a lot more houses in Bella Vista. When you say 13,000 houses, that's quite a few. Now, it's spread out over a lot of mileage, so you don't see them, but there are a lot of houses out there. There are a lot of people out there that live in Bella Vista. So far, we've been able to keep our head above water and keep the streets up and all of the things that cities provided. It's going to get more and more difficult all the time as the tax dollar gets spread among more and more cities and more people in northwest Arkansas or Benton County. And it's hopefully going to be doable, but it's going to be difficult without the commercial base that most cities have. Even Pea Ridge or Centerton, who are less than half our size, have more commercial activity than we do. They have more restaurants, they have more drive-throughs, they have more drive-ins, they have more of everything. We just don't have that. And again, it was probably short-sightedness on the developer's part, although from his standpoint, he was attempting, or they were attempting to control the commercial for themselves in order to have that as income to the developer. So I understand that too. And the developer stayed with the community for quite a while and still is with the community to some degree and on most issues. So it's a good town from that standpoint. Do I foresee in the future that there may be some difficulties? It could get difficult as we get more and more build up all the time, because again, there's just not that much in the way of income or ways that we can get money.
If someone, I got just a couple more questions here. If someone came to you maybe from another part of the country or another part of the state and said, hey, I know you're from Benton County. Tell me about what it's like where you live in Benton County. What would you tell them?
Benton County, I think, is very progressive, does a good job county. I think we've been probably very good for the most part at selecting leadership in Benton County, at least the time I've been here. We've had good, strong leaders that have looked ahead well, have planned well. You have three of the biggest corporations in the world here in this general area, with the truck line, the chicken processor, and Walmart, who I think, from what I see, do a good job in helping keep the community alive. I think it's a great place to live. It's getting a little crowded and it's getting a little expensive, and it's probably going to outprice itself in one of these years and be to the point where it's not quite as great a place to live, but right now it is. You can get an awful lot of house for your money still. How much longer that's going to exist, I don't know, because you see all the articles now where people are beginning to wonder, can I afford to live there? And that happens to every place when it gets too popular.
How, if you had to complete this sentence, how would, as you say it, or restate the sentence? My favorite thing about Benton County is.
I think my favorite thing about Benton County is you can do anything you can do anywhere in the country, you can do here in Benton County. It's got everything. It's got the art, it's got museums, it's got anything and everything. It's, I think, an amazing place for no bigger than it is. When you get down to it, to have the 250,000 people we got in this area, that's not a huge, giant size thing, but it got anything you want to do is here, from education all the way through the arts.